Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it is truly an honour to follow the honourable gentleman. I want to begin, Mr. Speaker, by making a brief comment. I was in Belfast and Bangor last week, and I met many people who felt that they had been forgotten by this House, not by their own members of Parliament, but by the House at large. And I want to say to them that they have not, and they will be, not forgotten. And equally, members of the Irish community in Liverpool said similarly to me over the weekend, and I say the same to them. We will not forget the Good Friday Agreement, and we will do everything to protect it. That said, I agree, Mr. Speaker, perhaps surprisingly, with the member for Wellingborough. He said that he is against the deal because it offers absolutely no certainty for the future and simply continues this charade for years and years to come. And, Mr. Speaker, he is absolutely correct. And I want to say very briefly some comments about the politics and about the economics of the situation we face. And first, the politics. We have seen in the past 24 hours, with the behaviour of the ERG, an absolute disgrace. They are only interested in their own power. They do not, Mr. Speaker, want a deal of any kind. They want to lead the government and our country on a dance. That is what they want. And until we all realise that, we will be kept going round and round this roundabout. The deal makers in this House, Mr. Speaker, are over here on these benches. It is unsurprising that people who come from the Labour movement should know how to negotiate and do a deal, and the government should have always looked to us. But we have been ignored because we are simply pawns in a game with the players who are fighting not for our country but over the soul of the Tory party. Now, I have some sympathy with those on the Labour benches who do want to find a deal, but we come back to the problem that the member for Wellingborough pointed out. That anything that's in the political declaration about the future framework is frankly pie in the sky. It answers no questions, and what's more, as the Prime Minister has demonstrated to us all, it is very difficult to take her at her word. It is incredibly difficult to trust the Tories. That said, Mr. Speaker, on the economics, the problems are even more profound. Economists talk about sunk costs, things you spend money on that seemed like a good idea but turn out to be a bad idea. And in that sense, Mr. Speaker, Brexit is now a sunk cost. We have been spending money hand over fist on no-deal preparations that we hope that we'll never need, just in case. But in fact, in economic terms, no deal is already happening. The disinvestment is already happening. Currency shifts are already costing us in terms of inflation, and growth is losing pace. But that is worse than that. Some people will rightly tell me, well, the overall figure of growth doesn't really matter because my constituents are poor enough already. Well, the fact is this. Those in areas that voted for Brexit will be hit worse by it in the north of England. So the north-south inequalities won't be helped by Brexit, they will simply be made worse by it. And that, Mr. Speaker, is why Brexit is a sunk cost. And let me tell you, sticking with a plan simply because you've already spent money on it is irrational. And that's why I think we have to ask ourselves the hardest of questions. Should we really keep going along with Brexit just because we said we would, despite the costs, whatever happens, because we've spent money on it, even if it turns out to be a really bad idea? Now, some people will say, I will give way.
Matt Weston. Thank my honourable friend for giving way to make a very powerful speech. We are now really in project reality, not project fear. We're beginning to see, as she said, some of the indicators of what's happening in our economy. Consumer confidence now at its lowest level since 2012. Business confidence also very low. 4 consecutive quarters of disinvestment. This is what's really eating away, and we should be attacking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I simply listened to the words of the member for Meriden and the member for Birmingham Erdington. I find it very hard to listen to them talk about the unemployment rates in their constituencies and think that Brexit has anything to offer them It will be a hindrance, not a help, Mr. Speaker. So some in this country who voted for Brexit, who are not from the poorest parts of this country, will say, to be honest, they're not bothered about the cost. They want all of the other things that people talk about, this kind of notion of sovereignty, even though, you know, we've shared sovereignty as a nation for many, many years. They will say, it doesn't matter what it costs, I just want it, it's worth it to them. Well, that's fine, Mr. Speaker, for those people. It's fine to take an irrational decision for yourself. If that's what you really want, fine. But the question for us in this House is it okay to take an irrational decision on behalf of other people?
Exactly.
And I simply ask, Mr. Speaker, do not we owe our country a bit better than that?
Yeah.
David T.C. Davis.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 years, those of us who voted for Brexit have been treated with scorn.